Hey friends, Kevin Duragi. Welcome to the Kevin Duragi Show. Today is going to be super fun. So you guys know that I like history and I like kind of talking about some of these things. But what I like to do is follow, really, it's the leadership, right? I like to follow the leadership, real examples of people. So I'm going to tell you a little history stuff, but I'm going to turn around into leadership or better, I'm going to say it in entrepreneur terms, right? Just so it's fun and we could learn from something that has happened in the past. I'm gonna ask you a question this time. So the question is, what would you do if you're given a gift? We're gonna go through and we're gonna use some historic terms to kind of open this up. But I'm gonna talk about a classic conflict, right? So throughout history, we have this East versus West. But going back, like the OG East versus West, right? The original fight actually goes back to the Persians and the Greeks. Just to kind of set the table, we're talking BC. So we're talking pretty old, right? At this time, Persia is this massive, massive empire, right? So they span most of the Mideast, right? So they go down into Africa, the Fertile Crescent, over up to India, up into almost like Europe area up north. And at that time, the Greek city-states were kind of like the backwater, right? They were the, think of small townships, or, they were kind of cities, but not near what was going on in Persia, right? Persia was so far along. And it would really be kind of like some rednecks holding out against a larger sophisticated army. So with that context, right, the first conflict they had was something called a Battle of Marathon. And you might recognize this one. It was a Persian expeditionary force, right? So just basically think of a large scouting party just to see what's there. And they run into the Greeks. And that's where they had this big fight. It's called the Battle of Marathon. The runner, right, wanted to tell the city what happened, so he runs from Marathon, right? It's actually a location. They had a fight there on the coast, and he ran up to Athens to let them know what happened. That he ran 26.4 miles. He said, "Hey, we won," and then he died because he ran that far. So we honor it with a marathon where people do this for fun. I always find it interesting. We honor the marathon by doing the marathon and think it's fun when the guy who started it died. All right, there you go. So if we use the Battle of Marathon, 10 years later is actually the point that I want to talk about. So the Persians kind of get pissed off at the Greeks, right? So they do this two-prong attack. One, they gather a massive army, just massive army. And it goes up through, kind of like the Turkey area, the Hellespont. They're going that way over to Greece. And they also create this massive navy, the navy to basically support the troops and also kind of clear the waterways. So that is the Persians' two-prong attack. And the Greeks basically had to go into the defense. So what we know of more is Thermopylae, right? Think of the 300 Spartans and this massive fight there. So the Spartans come up with some other Greek troops, and they come up and they go to the bottleneck, right? So the fewer numbers could hold off a massive amount of Persians, right? So this is where the movie comes in, or some of the heroic stories. And really where the 300 come in this is like Leonidas. He's fighting against Xerxes. It's basically a giant stall. And they basically stall this army for 4 days, 5 days, something like that. But it was a massive delay, right? So it slowed down the Persians, but it really did not stop their invasion, right? But it was a crazy story against all odds, that type stuff. And it also showed that the Greeks were massively fierce against the Persians. But really, the thing that really changed the battle was the other prong, right? So we always hear about that land fight, Leonidas, which is awesome, right? Totally awesome. But what we don't know as much is the Battle of Salamis. Okay, so this is the Navy. So the Persians come in, and just to give you a time frame here, we're about 480 BC, so before Christ. So this is pretty old, right? So the Persians start coming in and they're massively, well, the Greeks are massively outnumbered. So to give you an idea, the trireme, which is the Greek ship, it's 3 rows of 100 oars, trireme. So the Greeks had better boats, like they were more armored, they were better seamen, they had more Navy experience, and they knew the terrain, right? So the Persians came in, and just to give you an idea, there's about 371 triremes, right? The Greeks had about 371 ships, and the Persians had about 900 to 1,200 by all accounts. They had about that many more, right? So they were just this massive fleet. And the Greek Navy kind of hid and kind of lured the Persians in. There was a massive battle, that's the Salamis, and the Persians just totally got their butts kicked, right? So that is how, and from then on, the Persians, their Navy kind of hid in the background. They were not as fierce. They did not run out. They played more of just a supporting role. They weren't going after the Greek Navy as much. Just so you know, the Persians did continue to advance right after the Battle of Salamis and Thermopylae. They did come in and they sacked Athens. All Athens left, right? All the people that came in, they sacked it, and they said, you know what? We don't want to deal with this, because they showed how strong and annoying they were on the land battles, and because it was so expensive and hard to support them with their Navy, right? Because they were not able to take out the Navy. They just decided that it wasn't worth it, and they pulled back. They desired that it wasn't good to stay, and they went home, and they were going to come back later. But the reason why was because they took such a massive hit on their Navy, and they just didn't, it wasn't worth it. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but let's do this. Let's go back 10 years. So the Battle of Marathon just happened. The Greeks won, right? They won because the Persians went home. And in Athens, so a city in Greece, they came across their first gift. So it's called the Aurorian Mines. Guys, I don't speak Greek, so work with me on these things. So they came in their mine around the city, they came across something called a silver vein. So this was just not normal operation money, right? But they came across just a bunch of silver. It was like a gift. They were given a gift of this silver, and they had this massive amount of money. So they basically asked themselves and their councils, like, hey, what should we do? We were given a gift of this silver. How should we spend it? And there was 2 theories of thought that came in, right? One was, guys, we were given this. There's so many citizens. Let's give so much to each citizen, and they could do what they want. Fine. Okay. The other guy, he came in and said, you know what? We just fought the Persians, and they came in, and we were able to defend our shores, but it was just a contingent. It was a small scouting party. I think they're going to come back. What we need to do is invest in our Navy, right? We need to buy some triremes. So that is actually the way that they ended up going. Because he's like, hey, we could use it for commercial, right? We could navigate the waters. We could get more trading stuff out of it. And it's also there for defense, because the Greeks, because their terrain was so rocky and tough, it was actually easier for them to sail and explore than it was just to keep kind of, growing linearly, because their terrain was so tough. So that's actually why they became really good seamen. So it was this guy, Themistocles. Again, I'm not Greek. I'm doing my best here. Themistocles. So Themistocles comes up and says, hey guys, we were given a gift. Why don't we invest it in the Navy? And they built 200 triremes. So that was his insight that he had based on the gift of resources. So because of that, they went out and they were able to get up to that 371 boats against the massive amount of the Persians there. And because of that gift of insight and that gift of resources, right, the silver, they were basically able to tip the balance there, right? So if we look at this East versus West, one was like a dictator, right? It was one guy's in charge. He's a part god. He's able to do all this stuff and forced all these slaves into war. While the other side was basically our first remnants, our first start of democracy. And because they were able to do this massive war, these two skirmishes, etc., it was a gift of time to really let democracy kind of grow up, because this is where democracy all starts. It's back in ancient Greece. And why is this important? Because of freedom. This is the first areas where freedom starts. And we owe so much, right? And if we go back and back and back and unfold this onion, what are we actually thankful for? Well, the insight, the strategies that Themistocles had at the Battle of Salamis, that Leonidas had at Thermopylae. But if we keep peeling, why? It's because Themistocles was the statesman at that time that said, hey, let's look forward and buy some boats. These boats are going to help us with commerce. These boats are going to help us with defense, right? So we were gifted and thankful to Themistocles for being able to have that insight with that gift of resources to support it. So the question is, what would you do with a gift? Okay, let me tell you a couple other ones that I think are pretty fun. So Harlan, he's about 65 and he gets his last check. Call it retirement, call he was fired, whatever it was. But he was given this gift, right? This small check, and he had this love of cooking, right? So he went out, got a little shack, and he started making his famous fried chicken. So we don't really know of Harlan, but we do know Colonel Sanders and his 11 herbs and spices, right? So it's because he had that adversity, right? He was let go. He was given a check. He wasn't ready to count his life over. Instead, that was start of his chicken empire, which we now know as Kentucky Fried Chicken or KFC. So kind of awesome to see how he was able to do that. Another quick one. So this unemployed guy, he's poor, right? He doesn't have much money, but he went and saw Muhammad Ali fight, right? So he had this gift of insight. He was like, oh my gosh, this makes such a great story. He sits down for about 3.5 days and writes out this amazing script, right? And he showed it to some movie people. And movie people are like, we love it. We'll buy it from you. And he's like, no. Here's the deal. I want to act in it. They're like, dude, you're a nobody. We like your scripts, but, this is how it'll work. So they go back and forth a little bit. And this dude is poor, right? He even had to sell his dog because he couldn't afford the dog food anymore. Eventually, they come on and say, all right, I'll tell you what, we'll let you act. We'll let you do that. We won't pay the full royalties for the script, but I'll tell you what, we'll let you act. Well, that movie turns out to be Rocky, which turns into the Rocky franchise, which turns into now the Rambo and the Rambo franchise, and then also the Expendable franchise, and now the TVs and all the ads. And this is the start of Sylvester Stallone, right? Stallone was given the gift of insight and inspiration that he took that opportunity and he bet everything on it, right? This movie script to basically get himself and his ideas out there. And now he has helped shape what Hollywood looks like. So what a cool little gift there was. So, I think we always think of these gifts of insight or money or resources, right? But sometimes it is the adversity, right? It is the calamity or the things that we would perceive as negative. So I recently got a call from one of my buddies. He's like, oh, Kevin, man, this is bad. I was just let go of my job. Kind of the woe is me. And I was like, dude, that's fantastic. Congratulations. I don't know if that's what he was expecting, but he hated the job. He hated all this stuff. But it was stopping him from becoming what it was he wanted to be, right? Sometimes we call it the golden handcuffs. But he was basically doing that just so he would kind of pay the bills or kind of buy some time until one day something happened. Well, that something happened actually was the loss of the job, which gave him the freedom to be able to invest in himself. My storyline is very similar to that. I tried to go into corporate America. I tried to be an engineer. I tried to go in and work at an office. It just didn't fit for me. So I don't know, maybe you're the same way, but it would have been difficult to kind of tell my family, my wife, etc., hey, I'm going to jump out, quit my job and just try to figure this out. Like they probably would not have followed along, but because I was let go, I was also given a bit of wisdom. My coach, George, who I've talked about previously, he basically said, Kevin, stay in as long as you can. as long as you can, because you're going to learn, you're going to get so much more out of this time. And I did. And now I am a full-time real estate investor, all because I was able to jump out and just try it and not give up and have that grit to succeed, because it really does force you to grow. So sometimes that gift of adversity is enough for you to get out there and just keep going. One quick story I want to end on. So I had a buddy, a couple buddies went down and they did a Christmas dinner. So in St. Louis, they were down in South City. They did this nice meal, right? So it was him and some friends, and they had this meal. They go across the street because they needed something from the gas station. And the attendant was like, "Oh, you guys are dressed up. What's going on?" They're like, "Oh, we were across the street at this nice restaurant. It was great. You should try it sometime." She's like, "Oh, yeah, I've never been there. I always see it. It looks nice." So they left, and they were compelled to think about it a little bit. And they said, "You know what? Let's bless this woman," right? So they opened up their wallets and pulled out whatever cash they had. Guys, it turns out it was $27. It wasn't this crazy amount. And he comes back in and he's like, "Hey, we believe, it's Christmas. We believe everybody should have a nice meal. Here's some money, right? Here's a gift." And they tell me that she just started weeping. She just started crying because of such an act of kindness, right? That they're able to give this gift to her. And in context, I'm kind of thinking it's $27. It wasn't several $1,000s. It wasn't $1 million. It was $27. But that act of kindness, that act of generosity towards a stranger, I'd like to say it changed her life and she became this crazy. I don't know her story, but here's the thing. $27 to them was not a big deal, but $27 to this lady was a gift, right? What did she do with it to go out there and become successful? Maybe she got that meal. Maybe it was enough to do something for her kids. We don't know. Maybe it was enough to pay a bill so the collectors didn't come after her. But the idea is she was given a gift, and she has this potential of what to do with it. So guys, as we wrap up this story, the concept is, what would you do if you're given a gift, right? Again, it could be a gift of money, resources, insight. It could be a gift of calamity or adversity, so you could grow bigger and stronger to overcome it. So guys, thank you so much for being with us today. And I just want to end you, what would you do if you're given a gift? And better yet, how can you be given a gift to somebody and change their life? All right, guys, thank you so much, and talk soon.